Hi YouTube, I'm Miyagi, and this is a guide for Classic Doom speedrunning explaining how to rocket jump. The map I'll be playing on is called Practice Hub, which I've created to help others practice Doom speedrunning techniques. There's a link to download this WOD in the description if you'd like to practice on it yourself. This video will take place in the room titled Rocket Jumps. The source port I'm using is DSDA Doom, a source port with the primary focus on speedrunning while keeping the original game behavior intact. I highly recommend this port if you want to get into speedrunning Classic Doom, as it offers many quality of life features for speedrunning, some of which I'll be using in this video. Specifically, I'll have coordinate display turned on so you can see my speed, and I'll have the pain palette disabled via God mode for demonstration purposes. I recommend anyone learning rocket jumps for the first time to turn on God mode for practice as well, as it will give you a better indication of your trajectory if you miss a jump. Rocket jumping in Doom is the act of using the splash damage from an exploding rocket to provide a speed boost to the player, often across a gap. The term rocket jumping is a bit of a misnomer in Doom. You aren't actually jumping or gaining any vertical momentum at all. It's more of a rocket boost that's giving the player a large but short burst of speed. What turns a rocket boost into a rocket jump is the fact that this momentum boost is preserved when Doom Guy is not touching a floor. This allows the player to cross gaps much wider than what is possible with normal movement. There are 3 jumps in the first rocket jumping room in Practice Hub. 2 short gaps that must be jumped from a specific side, and a third slightly wider gap that will force a more precise angle and timing. If you're new to rocket jumping, one of the easiest methods to perform one is actually facing backwards. What's nice about this method of rocket jumping is if you have a wall next to you and you're attempting to jump a gap, your trajectory is straight and your rocket will always explode behind you. Start by grabbing a rocket launcher and face away from the gap you'll be jumping. Then, turn to look at the wall next to you in such a way that the side of your automap arrow is parallel with the wall. Finally, strafe run backwards along the wall and fire a rocket just before you would fall into the gap. The blood texture on the walls in Practice Hub signal a general window of when to shoot. If successful, you will have crossed the gap. If you fell short, you may need to adjust your timing on firing the rocket. Typically, you will want the rocket to explode just before you would begin to fall from the platform you're jumping from. While this method of rocket jumping is simple to perform and relatively consistent, turning around to line up your position with the wall next to you often takes time to set up. What if there isn't even a straight wall to line up with at all? In order to successfully implement rocket jumps into a speedrun, you'll want to learn how to do them while facing forwards. If you're practicing along with the video, I recommend the third jump of the first room for this section. The first 2 jumps are very forgiving, but this one's designed to require a bit more precision. Rocket jumping forwards is very similar to performing one backwards. You can virtually mirror your position from the backwards jump setup to perform one forwards, as long as you don't bump the wall. You may notice that sometimes you get pushed off to the side when rocket jumping forwards though. This is because the rocket is no longer always exploding directly behind us, but instead sometimes beside us. We can offset this by changing the angle of our approach. Generally, the goal will be to get more of a boost forward than off to the side, but this is completely dependent on the jump you're performing. I suggest playing around with this a bit. See what happens when you take a wider approach versus a more narrow one. This will reinforce what a good rocket jump looks like, and will help you to understand how your movement and timing affect your trajectory. This is why I recommend God mode at first. By disabling the pain palette, you're provided with immediate feedback on the trajectory Doom Guy's propelled in. Once you have the basics down though, I recommend re-enabling the pain palette. This is because the speed boost you receive is relative to the amount of splash damage you take, which is calculated by how close you are to the rocket's explosion. As with anything, mastering this technique takes practice, and that's what Practice Hub is designed for. Once you're comfortable with the more straightforward jumps in the first room, move on to the advanced room to try a few more setups. Beyond that, if you're looking to truly hone your mastery with a rocket launcher, consider giving these maps a try. And that's it. Rocket jumping in Doom can be a bit awkward to perform at first, so I hope this guide is helpful to those new to the technique. If you did find it useful, consider subscribing, as I plan to make more guides like this in the future.